And here's what our attorneys make us say. We believe all the information we offer on this program is factual and up to date. However, we cannot guarantee its accuracy, and you should not think of it as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. We are also not giving you an offer to buy or sell the investments we talk about. All investments involve varying degrees of risk, and we cannot guarantee any specific investment or strategy will be suitable or profitable for your portfolio. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.
You've worked hard and saved for retirement, but remember, it's what you do with that money that really matters. How will you ensure that you wring every nickel out of your Social Security benefits? Could you pay fewer taxes in retirement? And how and when will you withdraw money from your IRA or 401k? Welcome to Secured Retirement Radio with Joe Lucy of Secured Retirement Financial. Joe's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal, and has nearly 25 years of helping people just like you. This is where you can count on straightforward and objective advice on how to make your money go further in retirement. And now, here's your host, Joe Lucy.
You know, when you retire, well, how much money can you safely withdraw every year from your nest egg? Your first thought, well, it could be a 4% rule, which says that you simply just withdraw 4% from your 401k every year without the worry of running out of money in your retirement. But this 4% rule that's so popular, well, it was created back in the 1990s. Now, to put this into context, that's when, we were running around with beepers. If you had a cell phone, it was the size of a briefcase. And if you rely on that same 4% rule today, well, it could be a recipe to run through your entire life savings far too soon. Welcome to Secured Retirement Radio. I'm Joe Lucy, certified financial planner. I got Dylan Malberg joining us in our St. Louis Park studio this morning. And we're going to unlock at least one of these great mysteries around retirement planning on how to withdraw income when you retire. So go back to the 1990s. You may remember interest rates in your savings accounts were in the mid to high single digits. Healthcare costs, well, they were a fraction of the cost they are today. And life expectancies, well, there's been some major advances in that area. So withdrawing 4% of your savings every year in retirement, well, it was really no big deal. And it may have been, well, safe as kind of a worst case scenario. But today, interest rates are 0%. It's an attack on savers. Healthcare expenses are nearly $500,000. We're living longer. Inflation is roaring back. And, well, increases in taxes are right around the corner. These things all are going to have an impact on how much money you get to spend out of your nest egg in retirement. So today, we're going to talk about why this 4% rule of thumb rule, why it's broken, and how much money you can rely to safely withdraw from your retirement savings when you retire, and how that fits in today versus, 30-some years ago.
Morning, Joe.
Morning, Dylan.
Okay, I guess we might as well start with, what is this 4% rule that you mentioned as we get the show started this morning? And, the 4% rule, again, as you mentioned back in the 90s, it was created if we have a 60% stock, a 40% fixed income bond portfolio, that 60-40 blend that we hear about, you should be able to take out 4% a year out of that account, and it should be able to last you through your retirement, for your lifetime through retirement.
Well, understand the 4% rule was, it was created back in the 1990s by another certified financial planner. His name is Bill Bengen out of Sacramento, California. And Wall Street loved this rule. Wall Street thought that this was the perfect answer. Think about it. When you have advisors out there that are focusing more on how to accumulate wealth in retirement. That's where the boomers were back in the 90s. And here was such a simple strategy to make sure that this money was going to last. It was simply just taking 60% of the portfolio, putting it into stocks, and putting 40% into bonds. And then you started with a 4% withdrawal rate. If you had $500,000 in savings, you could take out $20,000 a year. Now, the way that Bill Bingen came to this is that he had done a study. He would gone back all the way to 1926 and took 30-year rolling periods of time. So 1926 to 1955, 1927 to 1956. And he put a portfolio of 60% stocks to 40% bonds into the historical markets, did a 4% withdrawal, and increased it a little bit for inflation. And he found that, well, 96% of the time, this strategy worked wonderful. You still had money after 30 years with the idea that you're retiring in your mid-60s and get you to 95. Well, think about the environment we're in today. CD rates, 5-6%. I mean, that was not even that long ago. But today, it's hard to find 1% on a one-year CD. I don't think it's even possible. The bonds, the corporate bonds that we used to get 7s and 8% on, well, that's no longer the case. In fact, if you start to look at the real possibility that interest rates are more likely to go higher than lower, it means that there's going to be some pressure on those fixed income, the bond portion of the portfolio. So when you start to recreate the 60-40 blend and you put it back into today's environment, as a gentleman by the name of Wade Pfau, P-F-A-U, if you want to research this yourself, has done, him and a guy, David Blankenship from Morningstar, they took the same periods of time, but now they adjusted the 40% of the portfolio that's in bonds. The result? Taking out 4%. It's a coin flip of having $1 left over after that 30-year period of time. We can no longer rely on that 40%. Now, putting it all into stocks, maybe that would be what you would think would be the solution, but when we retest that, when the experts do this, they find that it might leave you more money at the end of 30 years, but when this fails, it fails miserably. It means that after 10, 12, 15 years, you're broke. So putting it all into stocks is not the solution. Having the 60-40 blend and taking out 4%, Wade Faust is telling us that maybe we need to readdress this number, look at something closer to 2.5 to get us out to 90%. You know, traditional options to generate income in retirement, what was used back in those days is no longer viable today, and you want to reconsider how to withdraw money. You know, families accumulating money for retirement is the easy part. Just take a certain amount of your income, put it into this account, forget about it. Let compounding growth do its thing. You don't pay taxes on it as it accumulates. And getting to a point where you have this wealth set aside in your IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, that's really fairly simple. But most people don't want to get to retirement to just grow wealth. It's about how to take this money back, how to make it tax efficient, how to make sure it's going to last a lifetime. And yeah, sure, let's grow wealth, but never at the compromise of our income and maintaining our lifestyle. And if you can, let's help eliminate Uncle Sam.
Well, I mean, look at it. Back to the interest rates that have been historically low since the financial crisis and in 2008, 2009. And that's really great if we've been, you purchased the house, you're buying a car, you're making these purchases. But when it comes to retiring and generating income, that's how this 4% rule gets dropped down to 2.5. We see families come in the office every week, Joe, and they're taking, whether they maybe acknowledge it or not, but they're taking a lot more risk in their portfolio to make up for these lower interest rates. And, families tend to think retiring at a bull market, as the market's at all-time highs, is a good idea because the market's going up. It can sometimes be the complete opposite of that. And like you said, when we're 180% in stocks and the market doesn't cooperate, we find ourselves with a lot more time left than money.
Well, and keep in mind, Dylan, the market's been doing fairly well despite everything else going on over the last couple of weeks, right? I think most of that has to do with this infrastructure promise that's going on, and Wall Street's never seen a stimulus package it didn't like. But, we got this Delta variant that's going around, and I think that we're starting to see that in some of the retail sales. Folks are getting a little nervous maybe about that. Who knows where this is going to go with Afghanistan. But, markets are at all-time highs. And don't forget inflation. I mean, do you remember when gas prices were still below $2? I was looking at the pumps this morning, over $3. That's inflation. We need to start bringing in inflation. We need to look at the real possibility. We're going to start seeing rises in interest rates, higher taxes. When you retire, a lot of families find themselves in really just one of two camps. One is that camp where you're living off your savings. And every time you spend $1, you watch the savings shrink. And oftentimes that brings this anxiety or maybe a little fear that you could end up running out of money in retirement. Now, there's another camp, and that's where your money is working for you. Like a workhorse, you have income coming in from different sources every month like clockwork. It's what we call mailbox income. It hits the checkbook each and every month, regardless of what might be going on in the 401k balance. And what this camp gets is that allows them to do all those things they want to do in retirement. Nobody retires from something, they retire to something. And you want to retire so that you can be doing things like hanging out with the kids and grandkids, traveling, even buying that vacation home. I'd like to show you how you can make sure that your money is working as hard as it can be for you with a secured retirement income analysis. Here's how it works. We just gather some simple information from you. We'll outline several different options on how you can generate income in retirement. We'll sit down, we'll share some of these strategies with you, and you can see exactly how much more income you could generate by focusing on what's most important in retirement. It's really that simple. To schedule your complimentary secured retirement income analysis, just give us a call this morning at 952-777-8838. Retiring today, well, it's not necessarily determined by how much money you've saved, but it's determined on how well or your ability to generate income off of this savings in retirement. To schedule your complimentary secure retirement income analysis, the number is 952-777-8838. 952-777-8838.
When we come back, one of the biggest flaws of the 4% rule that could cause you to go broke in retirement.
Hey, he's Dylan Malberg. I'm Joe Lucy. More Secure Retirement Radio in just a few moments.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio. He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. You may not realize this, but he's kind of a big deal. Welcome back to Secured Retirement Radio with your host, Joe Lucy.
If I asked you, how much money do you have saved for your retirement? Most of us probably know that number pretty close right off the top of our head. Now, what if I asked you how much money you'll pay in taxes on that money you have saved for retirement? You got an answer for that one? Most of us really have no idea. In fact, it's almost impossible when you start to think about how much taxes could be going higher. And if you don't know how much money you end up paying in taxes on the nest egg, then you really don't know how much money you're going to have to safely withdraw from savings and retirement. And that's what we're talking about here on Secure Retirement Radio. I'm Joe Lucy, certified financial planner. I got Dylan Malberg joining us today here on Secure Retirement Radio. We're talking about income, and maybe more specifically, why a 4% rule of thumb strategy for taking income in retirement is broken. How much can you safely withdraw from your nest egg when you retire? That's the ultimate question. So coming up in this segment, I'd like to explain why you need to know how much money you'll pay in taxes on the retirement savings, plus some tax saving strategies that can help you save a small fortune in your retirement.
Well, and you look at this 4% rule again. It was created in the 90s. It was the income planning breakthrough that all the advisors were looking through. We look at how much do we have for retirement. We put 60% of it in stocks and equities, put the other 40% in bonds. We're going to be able to withdraw 4% a year over 30 years, and you're going to have money left over even then. And where, the 4% rule, we go back to, we talked about in the last segment, interest rates being where they're at, record lows. Again, we're looking probably more than 2.5% withdrawal strategy, But another place that this 4% rule falls short is the 4% rule doesn't take into consideration the taxes that are owed on the withdrawals based on that 4%.
A lot of times we forget what the largest expenses end up being when we start to budget for what retirement look like. Well, first of all, I know that probably 20% of us can tell you exactly how much money you spent in your checking account last year. The vast majority of us don't necessarily live on a budget. When I took my certified financial planning designation, they said we should sit down and make sure everybody is on a budget and you help keep them on budget. You know what? The reality is most of us, especially those of us that have done a fairly good job, it's not that we necessarily need to focus on the budget, but you also need to consider what are we going to be paying in taxes? What's going to cost healthcare? And understanding that there's an inflation wind coming at us here. Not just inflation on the price of what we're paying for gas, healthcare, groceries, but also an inflation wind that says that taxes are going to see some significant increases. How could they not after some $6 trillion, another promise of somewhere between $1 and $4 trillion, depending on which bills end up going through? There's no way possible that we can go into retirement, that we should think about going into retirement without to start to address what the inflation is going to be on our taxes. And if we rely on that old simple rule of thumb of just taking out 4% of our withdrawal rates from 4% of the balance from our accounts to get this withdrawal that we can take out safely, well, you could find yourself 80 years old, full of life, and dirt broke.
Oh, and you look at where the majority of families have saved their retirement. It's in the tax-deferred retirement accounts. And if you're taking out 4%, then you have to pay tax on that. A lot of families are going to end up taking out even more money to cover the taxes that they end up having to pay on those withdrawals. And they find themselves actually taking out much more than 4% a year out of those retirement accounts.
If you look at your balance sheet and you start to look at the categories of money that you might have set aside, there's that money that's sitting in savings that's the interest gets taxed each and every year. What interest we get, it's not anything close to what we were getting. There's also those brokerage accounts, whether it's an account that you own alone or maybe it's a joint account. It's a mutual fund account that spits off a 1099 every year. You get to pay taxes on any buys or sells or dividends, the interest coming from these accounts every year. And you pay tax on this money, regardless if you spend it or not, very similar to, wages in retirement or maybe the pension. There's also, on the far extreme of this, money that's completely tax-free, right? We have money like in a Roth IRA that once we put that money into it, we paid all of our taxes up front. It now grows tax-free, continues to compound like that other retirement account you have that's not been taxed. But when we take out the withdrawals, they're completely tax-free. There's not even a line item on the tax return. Think of your 1040 and find me the line item that says, here's how much money I took out of my Roth IRA. They don't even calculate it there. There's other sources of tax-free income, of course. You can use life insurance, health savings accounts if used for medical expenses. Even municipal bonds it can be tax-free. Under some circumstances, they might calculate into paying more tax on Social Security and things. In the middle, though, is where majority of families we oftentimes find have done their savings. It's what we were always told to do. Somewhere along the way, somebody said, hey, start to defer some of this money you have into this great little account your employer's going to set aside for you called a 401k. Maybe it was called a 403b or a thrift savings plan, Minnesota Deferred Comp. You put the money aside, we're going to give you a reduction on your taxes when it goes in. It'll compound. And you won't have to pay tax on this money until you decide to take it out in retirement. And that's where the number one lie that we've all were told somewhere along the way is that you put this money in, get a deduction when taxes are lower or higher, and when you take it out in retirement, you'll be in a lower tax bracket. But start to look at where the winds are taking us. It's very likely, and many families find this, that as they're forced to withdraw money, required distributions that have to come out at age 72, that every penny of this gets taxed. It gets taxed at whatever tax rates are going to be at that time. And it doesn't take a tax expert to tell you that tax rates are going to be going higher. So that amount of tax that you're paying on that number one, it's uncertain. What is certain, that for many families, they thought they would be taking money out at lower rates, and they're going to find themselves painted into a corner where they're going to be paying tax on money when they've lost all control of the taxes that they want to pay.
And you talked about taxes being your biggest expense, and retirement also can be the biggest threat, right? Rising taxes in the future, infrastructure, Middle East, everything that's coming. Who knows what's going to come out of that? The stimulus that we've gone in. I think it's nothing's for certain, but I think as certain as we can get that higher taxes in the future are coming, and higher taxes in the future means a bigger risk to your retirement, and more importantly, the income that you'll be able to receive and spend in retirement. The real one question you may want to ask yourself: are you transitioning now from this period of time when you were maybe 30 or 40, when the real objective of retirement savings was to grow wealth, get this to a certain point? Have you now started to transition anyways into a period of time where now it's, how do I take this money back and how do I make it last a lifetime? We're talking here today on Secure Retirement Radio about this 4% rule. It's a rule of thumb that says I take 4% of my savings and I should be able to live on that and make it last a lifetime. But now more recent studies with increases in inflation, interest rates, taxes, well, the 4% rule starts to look a little flawed, and maybe it's time to rethink something that was adopted back when we were, if you had a cell phone, it was the size of a briefcase, maybe you had a beeper back in the 1990s, and now we need to start thinking about what has changed and how do we have to address it. So start to think of your retirement accounts, whether you have an IRA or 401k. A lot of times we start to think of this as our money, but it's really just a joint account. It's a joint account between you and the IRS. And when you go to withdraw this money in retirement, you could be paying a lot more taxes on these accounts than you even know, and well, it could leave you just a fraction of your retirement savings. That's why at Secure Retirement Radio here, we've put together something special just for the listeners of today's program. You can learn how you can reduce, even eliminate taxes in your IRAs and 401ks. And it starts with a free, customized, secured retirement tax savings analysis. This is how it works. We just gather some basic information from you. I'll bring it down to the lab. The lab is going to run it through the system, and then we will determine some tax saving strategies that are best suited and tailored for your specific situation. We'll then sit down. We'll share the strategies with you. What you do with that is yours to keep, and you can see exactly how much money you could be saving by using some of these defensive tax saving strategies. The analysis is free, and there's no obligation. But I'm only going to be doing this here for today's listeners on Secure Retirement Radio. So, want to schedule your free Secure Retirement analysis? Give us a call this morning at 952-777-8838. I think the short window of opportunity that we've been able to enjoy with 40-year tax rates, 40-year low tax rates, is about to expire. And there's not a better time than right now to start looking at some defensive tax planning strategies so that your money will last longer in retirement. You can't wait. The number to call is right now 952-777-8838, 952-777-8838. Coming up next, if inflation is higher than the 4% rule predicted, could you find yourself running through your entire life savings far too soon?
We'll be back with more Secure Retirement Radio in just a few moments.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio.
Now 30.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. You may not realize this, but he's kind of a big deal. Welcome back to Secured Retirement Radio with your host, Joe Lucy.
You know, I find it somewhat amazing how much all of a sudden everything seems to be costing today. Look at the gas pumps and you'll recognize immediately that inflation is in full swing. Now, what do you think your groceries, your gasoline, any of the everyday items are going to cost you when we start looking out 10, 20, maybe 30 years down the road. Now, obviously, nobody can predict that, but chances are they're going to cost a heck of a lot more than it does today. And this is just one of several reasons why you can no longer rely on what Wall Street had adopted back in the 1990s, this 4% rule of thumb for withdrawing money in your retirement accounts. And we want to start rethinking that. So, good morning. I'm Joe Lucy, Certified Financial Planner. You're joining us today on Secured Retirement Radio. I got Dylan Malberg here from in our St. Louis Park office. So, today we're talking about the 4% rule and why it's broken and how much you can safely withdraw from the retirement accounts when you retire. So coming up in this segment, the impact you want to consider on how much money you can withdraw from your savings in retirement. Plus, we're going to share a strategy or two on how you can start to hedge yourself against the inflation that's probably here to stay.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this 4% rule this morning on Secure Retirement Radio. Again, going back to the 90s, this came out. We're going to put 60% of your portfolio in equities and stocks. We're going to put the other 40 in bonds. We're going to be able to take out 4% of the balance of the account over 30 years, and you're going to have money left over. And they even made the adjustment for inflation every single year, but that inflation number that they chose was a 3% year-over-year inflation number. And as we're seeing right now, Joe, what happens if inflation is over that 3% assumption?
Well, just go back over the last few months. We're talking 4s, 5s, 6% inflation year over year. It's starting actually to get a little scary. Who knows what's going to happen here as we go forward? There's a definite talk of a whole lot more stimulus here. We could argue whether or not the economy necessarily needs it or all of it. There's this... the headlines of the news here this morning are still focusing on things going on in Afghanistan. And the inflation starts to get kind of pushed under the rug. But I was driving in and I'm looking at the gas pump and I'm seeing over $3 a gallon and going, I remember when I was still paying less than $2. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. And that's here just in the last, 6-8 months that we've really started to see this. But what's harder to see is what this inflation is going to mean. Recently, Oreos decided that they're going to charge a little bit more for the same package of cookies. It's going to be out there. It's going to be rampant. And this is the first time, probably since going back to pre-2000, 2001, the collapse of the towers in New York, that we really had to worry about inflation. And in fact, to see real inflation, go back to the 70s there, when we actually had inflation and stagflation. And there's a lot of economists that are saying, look out, because this could be coming. Now, I know what the Fed's saying, it's just transitory. This is going to be a temporary thing. Well, it's going to end up being temporary. It's going to be long term. And if you want to focus on temporary, you want to make sure you have a permanent withdrawal strategy. And the biggest reason why this 4%, as Dylan was saying, is maybe flawed has a lot to do with the structure of the portfolios. It's 40% in bonds that were earning 6, 7, 8% when the numbers were done. And now if you throw in today's numbers, well, it's a 50-50 coin flip on whether your money's going to last. Wall Street, of course, loves the 4% withdrawal rate. I can simply write a quick little blog or article and tell you, here's how you take a withdrawal strategy. It eliminates all the guessing. All you do is you take out 4%. But start to read a little bit about what a gentleman by the name of Wade Pfau has written over the last 10 years. Wade Pfau is also an economist that has studied the same exact study that came up with 4% rule and published saying that 4% is a 50-50 coin flip. To get to a safe withdrawal rate, maybe it's 2.5. So what are the options? We need to start rethinking about how this 4% works. Maybe take some of that money that's in bonds that's going to have more pressure if we see rising interest rates, which are sure to come, and rethink how to do that and start to weatherproof our portfolios against what we could be seeing here, which is very likely ongoing inflation, which is going to have a major impact on how far your money is going to go in retirement.
No, we're talking about the inflation that we really, and you mentioned earlier, Joe, we haven't seen it since the 70s or the 80s. And you look at it, I mean, that was decades before this 4% rule even came to be. So, you talk about Wade Pfau and his new numbers, interest rates being low. Again, rising interest rates are going to have an impact on the bond market. We look at the 4% rule not taking into consideration taxes or even higher taxes in the future on these withdrawals. We're going to start seeing, if you're in the boat that you're going to stick to the 4% rule and that's what you're going to be able to take out in retirement, you're going to find yourself in a spot where you're going to be taking out more money than maybe you thought you would when you started your withdrawal and income strategy for retirement. Well,
and really, the biggest problem is if there's some of us, the 4% rule could work well. It's going to really depend, I think, a little bit on what the markets are going to bring us over the next few years. And now there's a lot of large folks that are futuristic type planning on what the markets are going to do. And they're starting to say, hey, the heydays of the double-digit returns in the stock market could be coming to a quick end here. They're very likely going to if we start to see rising. See, the markets love when the interest rates are low. It's like throwing kerosene on the bonfire. It just keeps on going. But what happens when we have to start paying for this? It's like staying up too late and drinking a little bit too much wine. You're going to wake up with a hangover, and what's that hangover going to bring? And if we run into a market that's a little anemic and interest rates, this 4% rule of thumb could be your detriment. It could mean that you're now 70s, 80s, and now you're starting to toss sofa cushions again, looking for enough money to hit the 4 o'clock early evening seniors meal or something. It's what we need to start thinking about. How do we start to address inflation in our portfolios today to make sure that we can get more out of this money to make it last a lifetime?
Oh, and again, inflation coming up for the first time in decades, something that we didn't really have to think about. And now what we've seen over the last 6 to 9 months, it's something that we really have to look at. How can we make the adjustments in the portfolio? How does it coordinate with our income and tax strategy going forward to make sure that your money is going to last you a lifetime in retirement?
Yeah, I talked earlier about Wade Pfau and David Blankenship and some of the articles that they've published here around this. But if you really want to get frightened, you start looking at Peter Schiff, Chiff, and start reading what he's saying. He's saying 20% increases in consumer prices by the end of this year. Are you looking at other strategies, or are we still doing the same thing we did in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s with our portfolios? Have you set it somewhere along the way and just kind of forgotten it? Or are you being proactive? Are you starting to look at ways that we can get more if we run into higher interest rates? You see, withdrawing money from your nest eggs in retirement is a little bit more tricky than what most people realize. And there's a lot of considerations that you need to start thinking about. How will this impact how much money I pay in taxes on this money? How much will this impact how much you pay in taxes on your Social Security benefits and other investment income? Could it push you into higher brackets? Are you going to be paying higher Medicare premiums? And is this the right time to be selling my investments, or should I be putting my money somewhere else that can protect me from rising inflation? Now, if you get this right, your money could last a long time, but get it wrong, well, you could waste hundreds of thousands of dollars that you'll never see come back. And that's why we put together something just for today's listeners here on Secure Retirement Radio. I want to share with you how you can learn to get the most tax-efficient way to withdraw money from your nest egg with a secured retirement tax reduction analysis and income plan. Here's how it works. We'll just gather the information. I'll bring it down to the lab. We'll put together some results or multiple different options for you that are tailored and specific to your own situation, so you can see exactly how much money you can safely withdraw to maintain your lifetime and what it means in tax savings over time. The analysis is free, and it's available to today's listeners here on Secure Retirement Radio. To schedule your free secured retirement tax analysis and income plan, Call right now at 952-777-8830. We're not going to waste anybody's time with some simple deductions that could just save you a couple dollars. We're talking about some real tax savings that can be tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. So make sure you call this morning and schedule your time. 952-777-8838. That's 952-777-8838.
How does living longer impact the 4% rule? We'll tell you the answer when we come back.
He's Dylan Malberg, Joe Lucy here. More Secure Retirement Radio in a few moments.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio. He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. You may not realize this, but he's kind of a big deal. Welcome back to Secured Retirement Radio with your host, Joe Lucy.
Talk out, let's have it talked out and things will be okay.
You know anybody that's still thriving in their 80s and 90s? Still playing tennis, golfing. You know anybody that celebrated their 100th birthday? I do. These stories are becoming more and more common. And because we're living longer and longer, this has had a profound impact on what your financial game plan should be, including how much you can withdraw from your retirement savings in retirement. Welcome to Secure Retirement Radio. I'm Joe Lucy, certified financial planner, and I got Dylan Malberg joining me. We've been talking this morning about the 4% rule and why you need to maybe rethink it. How much you can safely withdraw from your nest egg is a very important question. So coming up in this segment, life expectancy is on the rise. So how does this impact how much money you can safely withdraw early in retirement to make sure it's going to last a lifetime? How do you ensure the money lasts as long as you do? Dylan, we've been talking this morning about the 4% rule. The 4% rule states that it actually comes from a study back in the 1990s. A guy by the name of Bill Bangan came up and he did some research and said if we have a 60% stock portfolio, 40% in bonds, if I take out 4%, I can adjust it for inflation. It should make my money last. It was a 96% probability the money would last for 30 years, which was the average life expectancy back then. The problem with this is that 4% relied on 40% of our money earning 6, 7, 8% in fixed income. And now, well, look what bonds are paying us. Look at the CD markets are giving us. What we were getting is no longer real feasible, and especially if we start to see a rising interest rate environment, this 4% withdrawal rate could be problematic. In fact, there's many out there that say we need to readjust this down to 2.5%. The problem is that Wall Street doesn't like 2.5%. They like 4%. 4% sounds better. It's easier to put 4% in a newsletter and say, this is how you take your money out of my 1-800 mutual fund company. So that's where they stuck. Even if it does get us to 30%, do we need to start thinking about a retirement lasting longer than that? If you're retiring in your 50s, which we have families doing all the time, 30 years, it might only get you to your mid-80s. That means you're running how about if we go to 100? Need to start looking at how we're going to do that. In fact, more than 500,000 people today are celebrating their 100th birthday. And what they call centenarians is expected to reach 3.7 million over the next 30 years. Life expectancy continues to rise, and that means you'll need to make your money last longer in retirement than when they came up with this 4% rule in the first place.
Oh, and it also doesn't, we talked about the inflation. They assumed it at 3%. We're seeing numbers come in. Peter Schiff talking maybe 20% this year. What is the impact of rising tax rates over that 30-plus year period of time? How is that going to affect the actual amount of money that you're going to get to collect off of this 4% rule in retirement? Again, take it into consideration, record historically low interest rates, and again, bringing it back, what if we're living longer than that 30 years?
You know, when you start think about what's really important to you as you start to transition away from just the importance of growing your wealth. You know, the idea has always been you take a certain amount of your money, you put it in the retirement accounts, let the money compound. Let's grow the wealth, and then it'll be there for you and you can take it out. But when you start to get away from just the growing of the wealth and how to start withdrawing it, you need to start prioritizing what's most important to you. And one of the biggest priorities with families that we see in our office, it's not so much what's my balance sheet, but it's how certain can I be to maintain my lifestyle? Can I continue to spend like I've been spending and make it last a lifetime? The next question, a lot of families that we work with here at Secure Retirement Radio, well, they all tend to hate paying taxes. So it's like, how do I morally, ethically, legally reduce my tax burden? And then they'll say, Joe, if you can grow the wealth, that'd be great, but don't do it at the compromise of my income strategy, and I'd rather pay less tax. So we focus on that. And this is all we do. We work with retirees, families that are getting ready to retire, to make sure they do it right. If you are at a position that you're starting to look at retirement, you may want to make sure that you're working with professionals that are kind of doing the same thing. Oftentimes, as we're growing our wealth, there's really 3 levels of service you can get. The first level is about working with a firm that just helps you with the transaction. You get to buy and sell, but it's on you. Like the 1-800 mutual fund company, you buy your own investments. Number 2 is a firm that might help you with the portfolios, but it's only at the top level. When you get to the point where we start looking at holistic planning and we start to look at how do we make income last? How do I make it last a lifetime? And you need to start focusing on things that will make sure that they hit the checkbook each and every month like clockwork, regardless of what Wall Street does. That's why, if you're concerned about living longevity, you need to start looking at how to maximize things like Social Security. See, Social Security has to be the foundation of an income plan retirement. According to CNBC, deciding when to take and claim Social Security is one of the most important financial decisions of your lifetime. The problem is, it's somewhat complicated. I'd like to offer you this morning a free Social Security analysis. We'll show you the optimum time to take Social Security to get the most. We can even show you how to reduce or maybe even eliminate taxes, keep you from paying more for your Medicare premiums. If you'd like to get your Social Security analysis this morning, give us a call right now at 952-777-8838. That's 952-777-8838. That's to get the secured retirement Social Security analysis. 952-777-8838. That's all we have time for this week. We'll be back next Saturday morning with more Secured Retirement Radio. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
He's a certified financial planner, fiduciary, and a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. And he's no ordinary Joe. You're listening to Joe Lucy on Secured Retirement Radio.
Dead blood in the street.